Hey y'all, I just watched Godzilla Vs Kong yesterday, and though I enjoyed the movie, of course Hollywood threw in a bunch of things that some would call conspiracies, but those who are awake would see that these things are no coincidences. So let's get into it. Godzilla and Kong were titans. In Greek mythology, the titans are the pre-Olympian gods who ended up being overthrown by their children, the Olympian gods, by way of war. Their punishment for losing the war was that they could no longer operate in the upper world and were imprisoned in Tartarus, which was considered the lowest part of hell. What's interesting is that in Greek mythology, the Titans were a mix of the fallen angels and their offspring, the Nephilim of the Bible. The Titans come from Uranus, which is the sky, and Gaia, which is the earth, which is the exact recipe of the Nephilim, which are now the disembodied spirits we call demons today. I say that they are a combination of the two because though they have the making of the Nephilim, their punishment matched the punishment that of the fallen angels mentioned in 1 Peter 3:19, 2 Peter 2:4, and Jude 6. This is also better explained in the book of Enoch, the real one, which is not technically canon, but I do believe that it used to be, so I will read some of it to you. So let's get into it. And it came to pass, when the sons of men had increased, that in those days there were born to them fair and beautiful daughters. And the angels, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the children of men, and let us beget for ourselves children. And Semyaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear that you may not wish this deed to be done, and that I alone will pay for this great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath and bind one another with curses, so not to alter this plan, but to carry out this plan effectively. Then they all swore together and all bound one another with curses to it. And they were in all 200, and they came down on Ardes, which is the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called the mountain Hermon, because on it they swore and bound one another with curses. And these are the names of their leaders: Semyaza, who was their leader, Urakaba, Ramiel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Daniel, Ezekiel, Barakiel, Asael, Armeros, Batriel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samsiel, Sartael, Duriel, Yomiel, Araziel. These are the leaders of the 200 angels and of all the others with them. And they took wives for themselves, and every one chose for himself one each. And they began to go into them, and were promiscuous with them. And they taught them charms and spells, and they showed them the cutting of roots and trees. And they became pregnant, and bore large giants, and their height was 3,000 cubits. These devoured all the toil of men, until men were unable to sustain them. And the giants turned against them in order to devour men. And they began to sin against birds, and against animals, and against reptiles, and against fish, and they devoured one another's flesh, and drank the blood from it. The earth complained about the lawless ones. Now I'm going to skip to the punishment of the fallen angels and their offspring. And further, the Lord said to Raphael, Bind Azazel by his hands and his feet, and throw him into the darkness, and split open the desert which is in Dudadel, and throw him there. And throw him on jagged and sharp stones, and cover him with the darkness, and let him stay there forever, and cover his face so that he may not see the light, and so that on that great day of judgment he may be hurled into the fire, and restore the earth which the angels have ruined, and announce the restoration of earth. For I shall restore the earth, so that not all the sons of men shall be destroyed, through the mystery of everything which the watchers made known and taught to their sons. Side note, this is referring to the great flood that Noah and his family endured. And all in the whole earth has been ruined by the teaching of the works of Azazel, and against him write all sin. And the Lord said to Gabriel, Proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the sons of the fornicators, and destroy the sons of the fornicators and the sons of the watchers from amongst men, and send them out, and send them against one another, and let them destroy themselves in battle, for they will not have length of days. It's interesting that Kong and Godzilla had beef and were on site every time they saw each other. Right? Verse 10. And they will all petition you, but their fathers will gain nothing in respect of them, for they hope for eternal life, and that each of them will live life for 500 years. And the Lord said to Michael, Go inform Semyaza and others with him who have associated with the women to corrupt themselves with them in all their uncleanness. When all their sons kill each other, and when they see the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them for 70 generations under the hills of the earth until the day of their judgment, and of their consummation until the judgment which is for all eternity is accomplished. And in those days they will lead them to the abyss of fire and torment, and in prison they will be shut up for all eternity. And then Semyaza will be burnt, and from then on destroyed with them. Together they will be bound until the end of all generations. So now that you see this, isn't it interesting that they call Kong and Godzilla Titans, and that their homeland is the center of the earth, which is where hell is located? They put this stuff in plain sight and just throw it in all of the people's faces like it's a joke. The second thing I noticed that was to get to the place where they could reach Godzilla and Kong's homeland was in Antarctica, of all places. Any conspiracy theorist will tell you that Antarctica has a place in dozens of these theories. I want to read you part of Ella Cruz's article, Antarctica, The Gate of Hell, as she describes author of An Empire Beneath the Ice, Stephen Quayle's position on aliens in Antarctica. An Empire Beneath the Ice author Stephen Quayle reveals why most of what you learned about World War II is the defeat of Nazi Germany is wrong. You'll discover why the suppressed evidence proves Adolf Hitler didn't die before Germany surrounded during World War II, and he eluded capture. How Nazi SS members, scientists, and soldiers escaped with Hitler to create colonies in other parts of the world to continue their monstrous research. Why in 1947 Admiral Richard E. Byrd warned that the U.S. should adopt measures to protect against an invasion by high-tech aircraft coming from the polar regions, adding, "The time has ended when we were able to take refuge in our isolation and rely on the certainty that the distances, the oceans, and the poles were a guarantee of safety." How using advanced technology, Nazi saucers defeated the U.S. military long after World War II was supposedly over. Why the U.S. space program was mostly a sham, and why the UFOs that started appearing around in the world in the late 1940s were and still are most likely flown by Nazi pilots. How key government, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, financial leaders, and institutions helped Hitler come into power and facilitated the preservation of Nazi wealth and power after World War II. Why today's world is secretly controlled by a malevolent shadow government and entire populations are being surreptitiously brainwashed. How ancient stargates have been duplicated to open portals into spiritual and demonic universes. Why those controlling our planet have laid the groundwork for a takeover by a dictator who could best be described as the Antichrist of the Bible. Empire Beneath the Ice exposes the dangers our world faces and will arm you with the tools you need to counter these unspeakable secret evils. Now do you see? I encourage you to do your own research on these topics, but I find it very interesting that the portal to Kong and Godzilla's homeland is in Antarctica. Okay, so to my third and final point. The third thing I saw in this movie was that throughout the entire movie, Godzilla was on a mission to ruin the company who was creating Mechagodzilla, while Kong was unknowingly working for them. Both thought they were right in their own eyes and truly believed they were doing good. But when it came to each other, they thought the other was the enemy, and it became a distraction. Like I said before, every time these two were around each other, it was on sight. I think you can look at this as a metaphor for what is really going on in today's world. Let me explain. You have people at each other's throat all the time. It's the rich against the poor, one race versus another race. In America, Republicans versus Democrats. For Christians, it's a fight between people who do not agree with each other's doctrine. For the LGBTQ community, it's them against those who do not agree with their lifestyle. We are all fighting against each other instead of focusing on the true enemy, which is those who are running this world to set up for the Antichrist. The enemy has us fighting each other. We look like Kong and Godzilla fighting each other when the real enemy is in the background plotting and planning to wreak havoc. They were wasting their time and energy and injuring each other instead of attacking the enemy. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." It's time to wake up, family.